Board of Supervisors of King George County for this evening. Ms. Kopka, would you like to start out with invocation?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Heavenly Father, we ask that you watch over all who gather here tonight to perform the business of our community. We ask that you give us grace and patience and allow us to make the best decisions we can for our community. And I especially ask for prayers for healing for all those who are sick. And I know we have some constituents here who have suffered losses in the past week or so. And I would just ask that you welcome them with open arms. In your name we pray. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Mr. Miller, any amendments to the agenda?
The only amendment, and Mr. Granger may take care of that, but at the adjournment, it indicates that you're adjourning to April 5th, when you will be adjourning to tomorrow night, the 16th, at 6:30.
Correct.
Yes.
Do that. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
May I, Ms. Lackey, we have a member who is participating electronically, is that correct? Don't we have to read a statement?
We just need a brief explanation. I believe it's for personal reasons, so he has to give us what the personal reason is and his location.
Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
So it's Richard do that? Mr. Granger, can you hear us?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to attend remotely. I am traveling for work, and so I'm out of pocket. I'm out of the region. So just for work travel. I'll be back tomorrow though for the budget work session.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And if I may, we just need a physical location or approximate physical location from where he's participating.
I'm in Suffolk, Virginia.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, I'm going to open the floor up for public comment. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. If comments relate to a specific public hearing item, we ask that you offer those comments at the time of public hearing. Is anyone here this evening for public comment? Mr. Shelton.
Now can you hear me? Oh, yeah. A couple things. One, to let everybody know that the Historical Society will have a meeting here this Thursday at 6:30. The topic discussion will be the Virginia Indians. We have a couple of videos on it. Number two is we do have a King George County Museum here in the county that's open on Thursdays and Saturdays. We do have all of the history. We have the Black history, we have the Indian history, we have all kinds of histories that we can pack into one little place. Elizabeth Lee spent over 25 years building that museum over there, and we have a lot over there. So if you can come to the meeting Thursday, we will welcome you. If we get time, come out and stop and see us at our little museum and see how much we do have packed in there. Thank you. Also, all of you guys, thank you for all your work you do for the county.
Thank you, Mr. Shelton. Anyone else? Seeing none. Oh. Ms. Jordan, step right up.
Good evening, I'm Claudette Jordan, 11773 Big Bear Lane, Lusby, Maryland. Mr. Chairman, good evening, board members, county administrator, and attorney. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. As president of the Ralph Bunch Alumni Association, you need your glasses right now. Stall the timer. I would like to convey the excitement members feel to know that real progress and change is being made toward revitalizing the Ralph Bunche High School building. King George County's actions to secure the $500,000 grant for roof replacement, submission of a request to apply for additional funds to repair the electrical system, and also including the building on the county's list of properties to be evaluated for future use, are all in the steps in the right direction. Our officers and members support the county's actions, and we're working to continue this trend of forward progress. I feel I must make the county aware of a matter of concern to our association, which county officials may also find concerning. As we were recently working on and updating our media accounts, we came across a website, www.rbahc.org, that is soliciting donations to help us reach our milestones and provide the funding needed to create the Ralph Bunche Arts and Humanities Center. It goes on to say that their project is to transform the Ralph Bunche High School building to create the Ralph Bunche Arts and Humanities Center. The website includes pictures of Ralph Bunche High School with no mention of the county's ownership of the building, or that King George County had voided a relationship with this entity a year ago in a letter from the county administrator dated March 4th, 2021. That this group is continuing to attempt to solicit donations and fundraise more than a year after the county discontinued any former relationship may be given the false impression of a relationship to the county, as well as having the authority to transform the building that does not exist. Our association has several concerns with this matter, but mainly the very real misperception that the Ralph Bunche Alumni Association is affiliated with this group when we are not. It worries us that members of the public, and specifically donors, may be under the false impression that this group is working with the county and with Ralph Bunche Alumni Association when they are not. It is our hope that the county will investigate this matter to protect the long-standing legitimate efforts the county as well as Ralph Bunche Alumni Association are making to preserve the building and plan for its future use. Please know that our association values its relationship with the county, and our members fully support the Board of Supervisors in its current efforts regarding the Ralph Bunche High School building. Thank you again for the opportunity to address you.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan. Anyone else for public comment? Yes, sir. Step right up. You could state your name and address.
My name is Jeremiah Ling. I live at 14407 Hillcrest Drive. I came tonight regarding the proposed tax increase for property taxes. Saw that there was going to be a discussion on that later tonight based on the comments online. And I just wanted to make it, so back when a couple months ago, when they first sent out the letters proposing the increase in property taxes, there was a note saying you can contact the county assessor, reach out to them, and then submit an appeal to the assessor. So I initially reached out to the assessor via phone per the requirements. I tried a couple of times. I left a voicemail at least once that I recall. Never got a reply back from the assessor, so I ended up submitting an appeal. And then I only got back a note saying that my property value was going to maintain the assessed value that they had assessed it at. There would be no change, and there was no comment as to why it was or was not approved or disapproved or any sort of change. And to me, the whole process regarding the change of property tax values is kind of a big black box. There was a comment saying, here's what your property value is. It did not appear to take into account the fact that it basically doubled my property value since I purchased the home about 5 or 6 years ago now. Back in 2015, so I guess about 7 years maybe. And basically it was saying it was valued at $262 when I bought it, and now they're saying about $500,000. And so to me, there's a concern as to why it would jump that much, especially without any ability to get a hold of the assessor or to actually find out any detail as to what the breakdown was and why it was rated the way it was. Especially comparing to websites such as Zillow and everywhere else online, the range that they estimated was anywhere from 380 to about 470. And I submitted some of that documentation along with my appeal. And again, there was no sort of breakdown as to why that was or was not the case. That's the end of my comment. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I approach?
Yes. Okay, thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Okay, this time seeing none. Mr. Dines, anyone online? Did any board members get any correspondence that need to be read in? No. Mr. Collins, no? Okay. All right, at this time, we will close public comment. And we'll move on to reports of members of the board. Mrs. Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank Mr. Shelton for coming out and telling in an advertisement for the museum for people to visit. Ms. Jordan, thank you for coming out. I know I've talked to you a lot about, especially I give you all those yearbooks I scanned for the Ralph Bunch Alumni Association. Hopefully we can find the rest of the yearbooks. I only found 11. So hopefully, and I know your group has been a long time looking for that building to be a museum of some sort to represent the history, the valuable history. Sir, I couldn't remember your name. I apologize. But we are looking at everything. You could go talk to Miss Judy Hart, and maybe she could give you some more clarification on your concerns with the property tax. But we have not set the tax rates yet. But if you want to reach out to any of your board of supervisors, I apologize. I didn't catch your name. And let's see. Let me go back to my report. This week, I answered several constituents' concerns. I want to tell you about a couple because there might be other people in the community that have these concerns also. One of them, I had a constituent reach out about VDOT inmate work crew picking up debris on the main arteries and in neighborhoods. I reached out to our sheriff and to David Beal from VDOT and got some more information and referred it on to the constituent. But just to let the public know, these inmates are from this trustee work program that is highlighted in the VDOT Supervisors Manual. This trustee status is prisoners who are not convicted of a serious crime, and this program has been in place for a while at no taxpayer cost. But I do understand the concern and have spoken to our Sheriff Giles and our VDOT representative about that, and I understand from Mr. Giles that it has been forwarded up the chain of command. And so just to reach out, if anybody has any concerns, you can contact me. Also, I had concerns expressed from some of my citizens about noise and property damage from NSWC, and I just wanted to point out that for those that are new to the area or have concerns, you can contact NSWC DD Public Affairs at 540-653-8154. The NSA South Potomac Facebook page also has a weekly testing schedule. You can look up for more information. And then lastly, in a couple of days, I'll be touring the wastewater plants to gear up for our combined work session. And I want to specify this possible. I know there's a lot of social media scuttlebutt, but about talking and starting a discussion about the possibility of merging the service authority into a county department. And that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Skupka?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start by thanking everyone for coming out. Mr. Shelton, thanks for the update on the Historical Society. We appreciate everything you all are doing. Ms. Jordan, thank you for expressing your support for the steps that we've been trying to take. I know it's frustrating. We heard from a citizen at the last meeting that we're not doing enough, but we're taking it step by step, one step at a time. We're doing what we feel we can until we, get that assessment back, that report. And I think it's, is it Mr. Lang? Yes. I wrote down your address and I went on GIS real quick and looked it up. So thanks for coming out. Just want to make sure you understand all we're hearing tonight is with regard to setting deadlines for dates for when, like a drop dead date for your ability to appeal to the Board of Equalization. So if you're not aware, you still have the ability to contact the Commissioner's office and make an appointment to have your matter heard before the Board of Equalization as well. So if you haven't done that yet, I would certainly encourage you to do so. Thank you very much. Let's see, I attended the county budget work sessions Wednesday, March 2nd and Wednesday, March 9th. Thanks so much to staff for your work on crafting the budget process. I want to congratulate the Sheets to Sheets Run participants who competed and the volunteers who supported the event last weekend. I know that typically draws a number of hotel guests to our area, and I'm looking forward to hopefully at a future board meeting, Mr. Chalkley will bring some after race data to us. And one last thing, I move to appoint Mr. Stuart Ashton to the Wetlands Board. Mr. Ashton resides on riverfront property here in our community and is very active in conservation efforts.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And that's all I have. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Collins.
Good evening. Mr. Shelton, thank you for coming out and providing information on the Historical Society. Mr. Lang, I wasn't sure whether you had gone to the Board of Equalization or not. Okay. So Ms. Kupka's right. Go to, you still have time to appeal your assessment through the Board of Equalization. They can either keep your assessment, not your tax, your assessment the same. They can raise it or they can lower it. So that's the three things they can do, and they don't have an explanation. They just give you a verdict on the one-sided information you provide them. So just for your information. Ms. Jordan, you know, I was wondering the same thing. I've been understanding that there's another group that came in front of the board a year or two or whatever it was ago, and they didn't go with that plan. The board didn't, and I was wondering the same thing. Why is another organization raising funds for Ralph Bunch? So that's the question I would like to have answered myself. So thank you for coming out. And my last thing is, last meeting, I submitted a Foia request to obtain information on communications of the Water Authority and the Board of Supervisors. I filed a waiver of fee on the 5th day after the request was submitted. I received a letter from the county administrator that a fee for records would be $439.30. I submitted the fee of $439.30 from my personal funds. I question how an employee of the board can set charges for a board member and not let the board vote on the waiver. I also question that an email was sent to all the people that I requested information from will be self-reporting that information back to the FOIA. I believe this is inherently problematic and there should be a third-party facilitation of that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Mr. Shelton, thanks for the update and on the museum and everything. Appreciate that. I had also forgot about the Thursday evening that they were there, so it's a good reminder. Ms. Jordan, thanks for coming, and thanks for coming all the way from Maryland to support Ralph Bunch. And I'm glad that you're happy with the roof replacement and everything else. Mr. Lang, you're a fast talker. I got Jeremiah part. I didn't get the last part. But yes, it's a broken record. We've been hearing that over and over. I myself also never got a call back from the assessor either. So, you know, we're in the same boat. And they, like Mr. Collins said, we haven't, or and Ms. Binder said, you know, we haven't set the tax rate. So, you know, if it's something that we need to do, if we need to lower them, I don't know if we will. But, you know, we'll do what we can. It was, that whole assessment was pretty much a mess. So we'll see what we can do about it. But thanks for coming out. And I also attended the last couple of work sessions. We're getting closer to a budget for us for next year. And also to say thank you for all the folks that did the sheets run. What an awful day to do a run, but you know, I think last year we were there and it was 70 degrees and sunny, and this time we were fighting snow. So thank you for everybody that participated in that. And that's all I have. Moving on to consent agenda. Do we have a motion? Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Granger.
I thank you. I just say thank you to all those who came out and provided comment. I'll provide a more thorough report next time at the meeting personally. Thank you.
Sorry about that, Mr. Granger. I looked to my right and you weren't there. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Now moving on to the consent agenda, do we have a motion?
I make a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to county officials report. Mr. Jones, step right up.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and colleagues. First, before I give the report, just a little quick report on our office. We anxiously await finalization of the budget so we can get on with printing the tax bills. So I just politely encourage or ask as soon as that is done, if our office can just be notified of that, so we can just get printed. Sometimes that process goes a little bit long, and we aren't able to get the bills out in time for our customers. So just a quick little reminder on that. Our February report, we began the month with $33,180,508.13. We had $11,921,115.83 in receipts. We dispersed $12,113,861.97, leaving us with an ending balance of $32,987,761.99. This total has not been reconciled. There is a little bit of an issue with the school payroll entry that hit the general ledger, but finance department is aware of it. They're working with BAI help desk to resolve that. And as soon as that has been resolved, then the month of February will be able to be closed. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Any questions, Mr. Jones? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Mr. Miller, can you see that, make sure those get into the minutes?
Yes, sir.
Sheriff Giles.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, Mr. Miller, Ms. Lackey. I come before you tonight to advise you that on March 8th, 2022, the King George County Tow Board convened and voted to raise the rates for towing for the law enforcement rotation. Back in 2020, the King George County Tow Board set the rates for all wreckers that towed from the law enforcement rotation. This was done so all the wrecker services on the law enforcement rotation would have the same rates. And I can quite honestly tell you that by doing that, it minimized the complaints about the rates altogether from the customers. Most recently, some of the tow company owners approached the tow board and requested a rise in the fees due to the inflation and the rise in gas prices. I have added a copy of the new rates in your packet. Accident tows have been raised from $300 during working hours to $350 for after hours. And then after hours goes from $350 to $400. The large duty wrecker tows were raised from $550 to $600. Day dry went from $15 a bag to $30 a bag. And these rates we checked around are all comparable to the surrounding jurisdictions that have the fixed rates as well. So I just wanted to make you all aware of that and can answer any questions if you haven't.
Any questions? How many records do we have on? 8.
Eight regular conventional and 2 heavy duty.
Gotcha. Okay. Nothing else?
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question of the county attorney relative to this?
Absolutely.
Ms. Lackey, do we or the tow board, or does anyone have to make public advertisement, like publish the new rates in the newspaper or anything like that?
They don't need to publish the rates because their meeting was an open public meeting, but I think, for sake of public notice, I think it's a good practice that we're having the sheriff report it to the board.
Thank you. So would there be consensus of the board to direct staff to also have it posted on the county website?
Sure.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thanks, Sheriff Giles.
Mr. Granger, have anything?
Ms. Granger?
I do not. Thank you for the opportunity, but I'm good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, we skipped the approval of the minutes. I'm sorry to tell you that. We need to put that in bold, I guess, because it's kind of hidden in there.
We went right over it.
So if you would amend the agenda to go backwards.
We moved for the whole consent agenda. Isn't that the minutes also included in that as well?
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Somebody in the audience had pointed it out to me, so that was why I just wanted to mention it. Because I thought the same thing, but.
Okay. Yeah, we went right on through that and it was all in the consent.
It's included in the consent agenda items as 0.9 of 9 of 9.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Report for the county attorney now. I lost my train of thought here. Mrs. Lackey.
I do have several items tonight to provide updates on. The first being 2 new notices were received from Dominion Power. The first was very brief. It was a 2-page, which for Dominion Power is pretty short. It's a notice dated February 25th of an intent to file an application on or before April 29th for the approval of providing broadband capacity to internet service providers in unserved areas. There's no description of what geographic area that was. So I reached out to the economic development director so that he can track that issue once a filing is made in April to see who that might affect. They also have a notice to have in April, they'll also possibly be petitioning for another rate increase for that project. The second notice from Dominion Energy is dated February 17th. It is for approval of cost recovery for cost overruns at 2 power stations and a new additional project at a 3rd power station. Those projects are associated with state and federal environmental compliance. The cost overruns for the 2 power stations look to be about $18 million. The new project at the 3rd site is at a cost of approximately $119.7 million. So in the agenda packet, there's a public notice of an intent for an evidentiary hearing on July 13th. Dominion would be proposing to recover rates from ratepayers from November 1st, 2022 to October 31st of 2023 for a household that uses 1,000 kilowatt hours of electricity per month. It would be an approximate increase of 70 cents per month. and interested parties may submit written comments on or prior to July 12th. The next item I have is a brief update on retail marijuana sales. In the previous General Assembly session, there was a bill that was passed that would have authorized a local referendum on whether or not to allow retail sales of marijuana. But that bill needed to be reenacted this session, which just ended, and it was actually killed. It didn't move forward. So as of right now, retail sales of marijuana will not be happening in 2024. And also there's currently no authority for a local referendum on retail sales. Now could change in the next legislative session, but that's the current status. I also wanted to give notice of a possible change to the hunting ordinance. Specifically, for some time now, King George has allowed muzzle-loaded rifles to be used during deer hunting season, but not other kinds of rifles. So the public can look for a future public notice likely to be advertised prior to an April meeting that would allow hunting with rifles of a caliber larger than a .22. It would require that the person, unless they're a disabled hunter who has the appropriate licensure for a disabled hunter, they would need to be in a tree stand. They'd have to comply with all other law, and they could only have a loaded rifle when they have actually, when they're actually positioned in the tree stand. So that's, again, just something perspective just for folks to be aware of and to watch out for future public notices on that. I also wanted to mention, I believe all the members of the board are aware that the Planning Commission on March 8th, they took up the issue of a Planning Commission member who made some comments on social media that many found objectionable and thought were contrary to the commission's ability to act in an impartial manner. The Planning Commission, by a vote of 5-3, recommended that the Board of Supervisors consider dismissing the Planning Commission member on the basis of malfeasance. That would require a public hearing, an opportunity for that person to be heard. If there's interest, I'd be happy to provide legal advice either in a closed session at this meeting or a future meeting, or I could also do that by confidential legal memo for members of the board if there's interest in that. And then lastly, as was partially discussed in the public comment, there is a matter concerning the Board of Equalization on the agenda tonight. I just wanted to mention that contrary to my remarks at the prior meeting, I was recommending that a deadline be set for appeals to the Board of Equalization by the end of April and for the Board of Equalization to complete its work by the end of May. In looking at the notice requirements, I've slightly revised that. So in the agenda, the item actually proposes that appeals be made prior to the end of April, but in order for the Board of Equalization to complete its work, that a deadline not be set until the end of June rather than the end of May. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Granger, any questions?
No questions. I'm good. I wouldn't mind having a closed session though at some point though to discuss that matter.
Okay, thank you. Board members, questions? Ms. Kupka?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Lackey, at our next regular meeting, because we have a bunch of meetings coming up, at our next regular meeting, could you provide us in your county attorney report an update on the status? I believe in maybe December, Mr. Bush and I sought and obtained consensus of the board to have the golf cart ordinance revisited. So if you could provide the board with an update on that at the next, I guess it would be the first meeting in April, I would appreciate that. Thanks very much.
No problem.
Thank you. Mr. Collins?
No questions, just a couple comments on the Dominion Virginia Power notices, and in order to recover their fees of that amount, I would think that they would be part of their business plan to recover those fees and maybe spend less on public action from their liaison committee. The hunting ordinance, I would request the chairman maybe bring forth some experts on the issue, Department of Inland and Game and Fisheries. I've received emails from Mark Fike, who is a gentleman in the community who is an outstanding teacher and community mentor and a gamesman. It's always been the rule that on this side of the Blue Ridge, it's no rifles because of the topography of being a flat land. I understand through the county attorney that some of the counties have changed that to allow rifles. I would like some information from maybe the sheriff and the game commission in regards to that before a public hearing on that.
Okay, we try to get them. Will we have enough time, Mrs. Lackey, between the 2nd April meeting and the 1st of May for the state?
So it would need to be enacted in April at one of the April meetings. We'd have to get a representative available for one of those meetings.
Okay, Mr. Collins, if we're gonna have this at a public meeting, say the 1st of April, due to timing for the state, I've also spoken to Mr. Fike numerous times, and reps from DWR, Sheriff Dempsey, Sheriff Giles. They're all in support of it. So I was going to have them all come whenever we have the public meeting. Is that going to be enough time for you, or would you like to reach out to them personally?
So if you could send me that email or other type of correspondence that they agree to that, I wouldn't have any problem if our law enforcement community is in favor of that. I wanted to know whether they were or not.
Sure. I mean, I can also give you their emails or phone numbers if you would like to speak to them directly, but.
You've been in communication with them. You can just send me the information they provided you.
Absolutely. Will do.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes, I have a question, Mr. Chair. Ms. Lockey, I just want to, for Dominion, I had written down when I read my packet about the broadband capacity expansion. I would like to know a little bit because the definition of underserved can be many different definitions depending on who gives you the definition. So I was wondering, are they going to expand some of the work we've been doing with them? So I'd like more clarification on that.
I'll calendar the date. I believe it's April 29th that they'll file something. So we'll have some more information then.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Lackey. Moving on to our public hearing. King George County Board of Supervisors will now hold a public hearing that has been properly advertised to receive public input regarding an ordinance to set deadlines for the Board of Equalization appeals and deliberations. I will first ask for the staff report, then I will open the floor up to public comment. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. Please state your name and address before you comment. Upon the completion of public comment, I will bring the matter back to the board for consideration. The board may or may not take action tonight, depending on information received during public comment. Mrs. Lackey, I guess, are you presenting this or?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So there's an optional but not mandatory authority whereby the governing body can set deadlines for the submittal of an appeal to the Board of Equalization. And also there's an optional authority to set a deadline for the Board of Equalization to complete its deliberations. I could not find that that was done for the last the last general reassessment. However, 8 years ago, deadlines were imposed, and those deadlines were at the end of April and the end of May. So the current version, as I explained in my remarks, proposes end of April for submittal of appeals and end of June for deliberations of the Board of Equalization. And that's because that there are some notices that require 45 days notice in some instances. So if someone were to wait till the last minute to file the appeal in order to allow 45 days before their hearing before the hearing before the Board of Equalization, I'm suggesting the June date rather than following the pattern from 8 years ago.
Okay, thank you. Now I'll open the floor up for public comment. Anyone does care to speak on this? Seeing none. Mr. Dines, anyone online? Has anybody received any written statements? Okay. Do we have a motion to sorry. And so when I close the public hearing, any questions from the board members? Mr. Granger?
No, sir.
Okay. Do we have a motion to move forward on that?
I'll move to adopt the ordinance establishing deadlines for submittal of landowner applications for equalization of real estate assessment to the King George County Board of Equalization and for the Board of Equalization to complete its deliberations on all applications as presented.
Second.
We have a motion properly second. Any discussion?
What was the date? Do they have to have it in by? I didn't hear that in your motion.
So may I, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Yes, so I did read it as presented. So as it was presented, it is, let's see, ordained that April 30th, 2022 shall be the deadline by which applications for equalization of assessment shall be filed with the Commissioner of Revenue for hearing by the King George County Board of Equalization. And be it further ordained that June 30th, 2022 shall be the deadline by which the King George County Board of Equalization shall finally dispose of all timely applications.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion properly seconded. And we will do a roll call vote for this. Ms. Bender?
Aye.
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Ms. Kupka?
Aye.
Mr. Collins?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. All right, next up, presentations and reports. Community health assessment presented by Dr. Obasanjo. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Bengo Obasanjo. I'm the health director for Rappahannock Health District. I will use this opportunity to introduce myself. I had planned to do this early on in the year that I've been here. It'll be in 28 days. I've been at this job a year. So technically I'm still new, and I beat it. I beat the year mark in introducing myself. And I want to take this opportunity to introduce a topic other than COVID and what we'll be doing in public health, and sort of how we want to be your strategic health partner in public health for the county and for the Commonwealth. And with that, I will introduce my colleague, Miss Allison Miss John, to talk about our community health assessment.
Could y'all just make sure that microphone is on? We can hear you clearly, but we just want to make sure the public can hear you.
Can you hear me okay?
Is that green light on there?
On.
Okay,
I can adjust a little bit.
there you go. Thank you.
Better?
Yes.
Sure, great. Can I have the next slide, please? Wonderful. So I will be walking us through what has taken place so far with the community health assessment, as well as the next steps as we head into the community health improvement plan, kind of why we carried out this process, a snapshot of some of the findings that were uncovered specific to King George County, and then of course wrap up with next steps. Next slide, please. So this project was completed as a joint effort between the Rappahannock Area Health District and Mary Washington Healthcare. We did have about 75 additional community organizations who participated in some way in this process, several of which were specific to King George County. It meets RAHD's requirement for accreditation, as we're planning to pursue public health accreditation within the year. And it also meets Mary Washington Healthcare's requirements for the IRS as a nonprofit hospital. For community organizations, something that's going to be really helpful for grant applications. It's a nice, concise place of data that they can point to. And then probably most importantly, it's helping us to identify and address some of the important health issues that we're seeing in the community. There were 4 different assessments and data collection tools that were completed through this process: community survey, review of some quantitative data, what's known as a local public health system assessment, and then a forces of change assessment, which is very conversation focused. So I'll give a snapshot of what we found from each of those. This has been synthesized into a community health assessment report, which is currently available for public comment on our website, and will be available through the month of March. And then later in the meeting, I'll talk more about, or later in the brief presentation, I'll talk more about how this will be put into action in the Community Health Improvement Plan, or the CHIP. Next slide, please. So we collected survey responses from about 2,000 residents across Planning District 16. These show some of the responses that we received, some of the questions we received responses from King George residents. You can see that when we were asking about the most important health issues that community members are facing, mental health problems arose as the top issue, followed by COVID-19, and then finally by alcohol and drug use. When we asked about what would most improve quality of life, affordable housing came up as number 1, followed by mental health and substance abuse services, and then followed by good jobs and a healthy economy. Several other questions were asked as well. Those are all included in the CHA report itself. When it came to secondary data, and by secondary data, I mean data from a lot of other nationwide reporting tools and surveys, we saw several strengths for King George County, several of which are listed here. We see higher rates than the state and then the planning district when it comes to adults who are insured. We also see that King George performs really well on education metrics, which is awesome. Several areas for improvement were identified. These include, we see relatively low ratios of providers to the overall population, and you can see some of what those numbers look like in the chart there. Throughout the planning district, we do see pretty high rates of lung cancer, as well as binge drinking. King George specifically, we saw a large percent of disconnected youth, which is young people who are not in school or employed. And then we did see pretty high rates of low birth weight births, especially in the Black and African American community. This is where we really saw some health inequities. For Planning District 16 as a whole, leading causes of death are heart disease, cancer, and accidents and unintentional injuries. I will make a note that this data predates COVID-19 for the most part. We are actually awaiting later this month that we'll start to see some of that 2020 data coming out, so we'll start to see some of those pandemic impacts. Forces of change assessment, I mentioned, was a little bit more conversation focused. So this is not necessarily data that we're going to be able to collect from something like a nationwide survey or even from a brief online survey with community members, but we're able to see some of those themes that we know are impacting health in the community. So things that came up, and you'll start to see some themes here: lack of access to mental health services, challenges when it comes to transportation. Just a note that Medicaid expansion has taken place since some of this data was available, and that's impacting things like insurance rates, cost of living, affordable housing, and then lots of conversation about some of these ripple effects of COVID-19, where we're not talking about the infectious disease itself, but we're talking about things like mental health, isolation, economic impacts, that sort of thing. We can go ahead and go to the next slide in the interest of time. Our last fourth assessment was a local public health system assessment. I bring this one up because I think sometimes when people think public health, they might first think the health department alone, but there's really a number of organizations that play a role in the overall health of our community, including the health department, but also hospitals, law enforcement, parks and rec, neighborhood associations, nursing homes, all of these major players who we tried to get involved in this process. We went through a scoring tool of how we're doing in delivering what's considered essential public health services. You can see that there's, in the green, several areas where we perform pretty strongly. Our lowest point in terms of scoring was on developing policies and plans that support health. So this is really something that we're keeping in mind as we head into this health improvement planning process and are trying to address some of these issues that have arisen. Next slide. So we spent quite a bit of time sorting through all of this data, kind of identifying some of those top prioritized issues that need to be addressed in our community. Landed on these top 8, access to healthcare, affordable housing, chronic disease, education, infant and maternal care in the African American community, mental health, obesity, and substance abuse. What we'll be doing with this list of prioritized issues is ultimately narrowing down to 3 with the help of other community organizations as well as community members to really be able to hone in on 3 of these issues we want to take action on. Next slide. So as I mentioned, that report is currently available if you're interested in digging more into the data. Happy to have more conversation with folks as they do that. We will be launching the community health improvement planning process in April, and that first meeting will take place on April 5th from 12 to 2. It is open to the public, and we're aiming to have registration for that open by the end of the week. At that point, we'll be selecting those top 3 issues that we'll be taking action on and developing a plan to address some of those. Goal is that CHIP, or Community Health Improvement Plan, is finalized in July, and we'll have the next 3 years or so to really take action on that and make some improvements on some of these health issues. There will be funding available for local community organizations who decide to implement some strategies surrounding those issues. And last but not least, I'm really happy to connect with any of you or any members of the public on some of these findings and the overall background. Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to hear something besides COVID out there. So, any questions?
I have a question, Mr. Chair. For this CHIP program, what spurred it on? Was there a law, an act, or what brought it about?
Great question. So there's no law requiring it. It's something that many health departments across the nation are doing. As we're looking at pursuing public health accreditation, it is a requirement for that process. So that's really kind of was our starting point in really wanting to carry this out in the midst of COVID-19.
And then in the end, when you come up with a plan, I saw a small goal. What is your ultimate goal? I mean, you won't be able to solve all of the problems, but.
Correct. I think that's a really great way to kind of manage expectations about what this will be able to do. Our goal is, I'm under no illusion that we'll be able to solve all mental health problems for all of Planning District 16, but our goal is to nudge the needle. And so kind of start to have some programs and policies and strategies for addressing some of these issues and just improve quality of life that much more for the residents of Planning District 16.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Cuppa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you both for coming out tonight. I had a question, Mr. Dines. Could you go back? I think it's 2 slides, the one with the, yep, that one right there. Thank you. So can you tell me, is this, when it says local public health system assessment, is this just for King George County or is this for the entire Rappahannock Area Health District first?
Great question. So when we were approaching this project, we really wanted to have this local focus where we could. This particular assessment was focused on all of Planning District 16 or the whole health district, in part because some of these players, the way we're structured, we serve the whole health district. Same with, CSB, Planning Commission, folks like that. So this is looking at overall Rappahannock Area Health District.
Thank you. And then my other question is, you have some averages there. What is it, out of 5 or out of 10, or what is what is it out of? That, how many points could you have gotten, and that's what the average was?
Great question. It's out of 5, scale of 1 to 5.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Collins? Mr. Granger?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. You did mention some of your other stakeholders or partners are up there that you were doing this work with. I mean, who are those folks up in the region?
Sure. So I'll just mention a few. So Mary Washington Healthcare and then Rappahannock Area Health District were kind of the big drivers behind this. We did have Community Services Board, members of various school districts, including somebody from King George. We had several faith-based leaders. We tried to gather local organizations who are focused maybe on specific populations like NAACP, Lucia Ministries, I'm drawing blanks. I can provide the whole list. It's actually available in one of the appendices of the report as well.
I was just curious about who the folks up there you were all working with, and like you said, just the different groups of folks. So, okay, well, thank you very much for coming out and presenting.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to action items 311, Department of Economic Development and Tourism, Tourism Advisory Committee application. Ms. Wilson, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Kimberly Wilson, and I am with the Economic Development and Tourism Office. Now I'm presenting the first of 3 applications for funding through the Tourism Fund. Let's see. Tourism funding application for King George County Independence Celebration. Parks and Rec is requesting $38,000 for the King George County Independence Celebration. This event was held twice, once in November 2020 as part of the 300th celebration, and again in July of 2021. This is a family-oriented event held the Saturday after the 4th of July. This encourages people to attend a local event that includes music vendors, food trucks, ending with a fireworks display. TAC recommends the board approve $38,000 funding for the King George County Independence Celebration, and staff agrees with TAC's recommendations.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Wilson? Mr. Granger?
No questions.
What was it last year? 36, I think?
Last year, they asked for $40,000.
40, okay.
Staff does have one recommendation. This application would come from the tourism fund balance.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion. I make a motion that the Board of Supervisors approve $38,000 funding for the King George County Independence Celebration coming from the Tourism General Fund.
Second.
We have a motion properly second. Any discussion? Ms. Wilson, is it just same group from last year, the fireworks folks?
My understanding, yes.
Right, Mr. Minor shaking their head. Yeah, great show. So we have a motion properly second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, this is tourism funding application, Preservation Northern Neck and Middle Peninsula, Inc. Preservation Northern Neck and Middle Peninsula is requesting $1,500 and funding to publish a second edition of its 2011 book, Historic Sites in Virginia's Northern Neck and Essex County, The Guide. King George County previously contributed $1,500 to the first publication of this edition. The new edition will contain places that were overlooked from the last publication. After review, the TAC recommends the board approve $1,500 funding for the book Historic Sites in Virginia's Northern Neck and Essex County, plus an additional $300 for the purchase of books that can be redistributed by the TAC to local businesses and hotels that cater to tourists. Staff agrees with TAC's recommendations.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? All right, seeing none, we have a motion.
I'll move to approve the tourism funding application for Preservation Northern Neck and Middle Peninsula Incorporated in the amount of $1,800.
Second.
We have a motion seconded. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
So I just wanted to share, I did a little bit of background. I looked this book up. I found it on Amazon for sale, but there aren't any new copies. They're all used. So they just don't have any more new copies to sell. And there were a number of comments from, I guess, folks who had purchased the book and had actually come from other places, like not necessarily Essex County or King George or wherever, to do driving tours just like it suggests just like what the book suggests. So it looks to me like it would be a worthwhile expenditure. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I also found that on Amazon as well. So I got that same information, and you can also get it on Kindle as well. You can get a nice download Kindle, and yeah, they had great recommendations. So where are we? Seconded motion, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thank you.
And the final funding application is for Doors to the Past, a King George tour of historic sites. James Madison Belgrove Foundation is requesting $10,015 for marketing from the Tourism Fund for the Doors to the Past, a King George tour of historic sites tour. This tour is designed to bring tourists to King George County using the Garden Week format, but focusing on history and historical locations within the county. This is a new event which will be a week long from May 8th to the 15th. Money requested will be used for promotions and printing of maps. Proceeds from this event will be donated to Love Thy Neighbor and the local King George County Animal Shelter. After review, the TAC recommends the Board of Supervisors approve $10,015 funding for the Doors to the Past, a King George tour of historic sites. Staff agrees with TAC's recommendations.
Any questions? So this is the first time, right? And was this also the one that's going through other historical sites in the county, or was it just at Belgrove?
It is, right now they have 13 participating sites. Ms. Darnell is here if you'd like to ask her some additional questions about it.
I guess just that answer. I see you shaking your head no. Is it just Belgrove this year? No. Okay. Can you step up and tell us who and where?
So thank you for taking this up on the board today. Hello to everyone. I'm Michelle Darnell with Belgrove Plantation, but I'm also with the James Madison Belgrove Foundation. And I'm coming before the board today to ask for help putting on this historic tour. This tour, it was formatted according to the Historic Garden Week, and we have reached out to multiple places within the county. We currently have Belgrove Plantation, Belle Plaine, Claydale, Estate at Whitehall, Bleak Hill Farm. The back porch is going to be putting an exhibit on for the iron mine that's down near them. Ralph Bunch is going to be opened, not open, but the grounds will be only, these are grounds only. Emmanuel Church, Lem Creek Church, St. Paul Church, St. John's Church, Office Hall, and Aspen Grove. We are going to be putting together a guide that will have all the information on these local sites that are on the tour and that are not on the tour, so that we're able to teach people about our history. One of the things that I hear a lot when people come to Belgrove to visit us is, oh my gosh, I didn't know you had this much history here. So I'm proposing that we put this together as a yearly event. not to benefit Belgrove and not to benefit the James Madison Belgrove Foundation. I'm just doing the legwork. All the money that will be made for this will go back to a community charity. It's a community outreach. It's nothing about Belgrove. We're just going to be a part of it. So those are what I have available. Oh, one other thing, I forgot. We are bringing in Caroline County and we are bringing in Westmoreland County. Caroline County, Port Royal is going to do a walking tour on Thursday and Sunday, and they're going to open up their museum, their portrait studio, and their medicine museum, as well as putting together a driving tour in Bowling Green. And we've got 3 locations within Westmoreland County that are willing to look at opening up as well. We're bringing them in, not so much that we want them to be a part of this is because we're supposed to be King George, but because we want to make enough money that we have something to give to the charities. So it's our first year. We're really not getting a lot of lead time to it. We're bringing them in just this year, and then it'll go back to being King George again.
And as I'm reading along, the tickets are $100, $150 per person.
After looking at our list and stuff, sorry about that. I don't think we're going to be able to get 150 out of it. I think we're going to have to drop it to 75 for the first year because we've only got so many sites that are willing to actually open the door and let people go inside. Grounds, anybody can do it any time, so I don't want to have a bad taste in people's mouth for the first year. So we'll probably drop it down to $75 so that we can get more people here, and then we'll look at getting more sites opened up next year and upping the price at that point.
So the folks that would have the tickets would go to, place XYZ, show their ticket to be able to get in or get onto the grounds.
Correct.
I take it something.
Correct. They'll have a ticket that they have to present when they get there to show that they have purchased their tickets. When someone purchases their tickets, they'll purchase it through the James Madison Belgrove Foundation Square because it's already set up. It's ready to go. All I have to do is plug in the tickets. Then we can also track who's coming, where they're coming from, how many tickets we have, so I produce a actual report that I can bring back to you and show you how well it went. And then we'll take the address and send them the booklet, map, and the tickets to use during that week.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else with questions? No questions? Mr. Granger?
No questions, but that sounds awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the Doors to the Past, a King George tour of historic sites, grant application in the amount of $10,015. Did I get that right? As presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion properly second. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
We don't have anything for discussion items, and moving to 315 County Administrator's Report.
Okay, so a number of items on there. First of all, status of the resiliency plan. So staff is coordinating with the folks from the Berkeley group to prepare the grant, and we have a meeting with them here later this week. So we are moving forward and as per your direction. And so hopefully we'll get that resolved here next month. But that is that's basically the only status that we have at this time. The other item on there is the proposed joint meeting with the Board of Directors of the Service Authority. I will, as I informed the Service Authority earlier, we'll get an agenda out here this week. Again, as the discussion as Ms. Bender indicated, it's a proposal in terms of bringing the service authority under the county's umbrella and having it be a county department, public utilities department. And that's just a proposal at this time. And that's what this meeting is all about, is to get the two boards together to, discuss the issue and determine their next steps, if there are any. Budget work session, just reminders, every Wednesday. Tomorrow night is 6:30 here. Then we'll meet on the 23rd, and you will have the school board coming on the 30th of March. They have to make a formal presentation of their proposed budget by the 31st. And then obviously we would then be working with the entire budget process in April. And obviously the concerns are what happens with the fact that the state has, closed their session without coming to agreement on their budget. And they're going to set a special session for the 27th of April, I assume, to take on that matter. And so hopefully we'll know some things shaping up. I think the one thing that we're trying to find out is things like the comp board and some of the other formulas that affect all municipalities and all counties and townships, how those things are going to be provided to us. They may not necessarily be tied to the budget, but most likely they are. I think the big impact on the delay is obviously what the school board, what their formula will look like and what their budget will look like. But we will continue to keep you apprised of that. The other item on there is, and Supervisor Collins had referred to this. Obviously, at the last board meeting, he made a Foia request, and you have the information at your desk that is inclusive of a number of documents. One is the actual request by Supervisor Collins. The next is the the letter that Ms. LaWanda Smith provided to Mr. Collins. LaWanda Smith is, as you recall, the duly appointed FOIA officer for the county. This has been in place for a number of years. Certainly is something that the boards have given her that authority back many years ago, and she continues in that position. The next item that's attached is a board agenda item from the 21st of August of 2018, which spells out from Dr. Young his recommendations about the King George County FOIA policy, and to authorize the county administrator to post that summary on the county website and to enforce this program. And I believe that one of the notes that he included in there was the key tenet, quote, "The key tenet of the policy includes charging fees for FOIA requests. This would allow the county to recoup the resources and staff time invested in fielding a request." And I think the last thing that was included on there was just in this packet was an email from our county attorney to myself, but also to Miss Smith, indicating the nature of the way the FOIA policies are handled in the state, and the way that, what governs the application of a fee or not to have a fee, and who can be charged a fee and whatnot, that is set by the FOIA Policy Council. And so she wanted to provide that information. I just wanted to point out that, Mr. or Supervisor Collins has obviously made that request to waive the fee. I am bringing this to you at this time because it's a board policy, and it would not be in my purview or my authority to make any kind of changes or to waive that fee unilaterally on my authority. It would have to be something that would come to the board. As I indicated again, I think Ms. Smith, it needs to be understood, is the FOIA officer. She has been serving in that capacity and was serving in that capacity prior to my arrival. I have not changed that by any means. I did send an email, obviously, to the boards of the Service Authority, the Board of Directors, and to the to you all, Board of Supervisors, which was in keeping with the existing procedures whereby previous administrator Dr. Young sent similar emails to the board and informing them that there was a FOIA request that and actions relevant to those texts and emails. And so I want that clear. And I think Supervisor Collins had pointed out that there was an email that I did provide, and that was just to let you know how the emails were going to be handled. And that was by Mr. Dines, who was our information technology director. He would then make that search according to this FOIA request, which was January 1, 2022 to March 1 of 2022 for Service Authority Board of Directors and for the county administrator and for the Board of Supervisors. So he has sent that email, or he has conducted that evaluation. I then sent the email, obviously that included about the text messages and what you need to do and to submit that information to Ms. Smith, who would then assemble those. The process, the way it works, I think it's very important, is the FOIA officer works with Mr. Dines in terms of this and this type of a request and Ms. Lackey, and they determine an estimated budget. And that is where the $439 fee was derived. It's based on the work estimated to take place to comply with the request that was made. I will point out, and Mr. Collins, or Supervisor Collins did point out that he has paid the fee, but again, he's requesting a waiver. And again, as I indicated, that's something that I don't have, that I believe I do not have the authority to make that kind of a waiver. So that's why it's here. I don't know how it needs to be handled. You can take action tonight on it, or you can do whatever you want to do with it. I'm just providing it as information. The next item on here is the employee hires and anniversaries. And you can see we had our treasurer, Randy Jones, was here earlier, 23 years with us. And he has been with the treasurer's office for all that time. And we have a number of other employees that are a part of this organization and are excellent examples of service. We have Ryan Portner, who is in the audience, who's with the Service Authority. Wave your hand, Ryan. He is 6 years with the Service Authority, so we're very happy that Ryan's here. I think that's all unless is there additional people, Chris? Don't think there is. No. Okay. Was that all the agenda items? Okay, so I do have two more items. First of all, to let you know that Jeff Jenkins, our Director of Landfill and Solid Waste, is leaving us April 1st. He's taking a position with the Spotsylvania County Department of Solid Waste. I have already moved up his number 2, who is Mike Newchek, and he will start effective April 2nd. And Mike is excellent and does an outstanding job of serving in the capacity as the number 2 or the assistant director, and now he'll have that opportunity to move up to the director spot. So our goal will be to have a seamless process for you. Last item I would mention is I sent an email earlier to you all today about the declaration that President Biden gave in terms of the winter storm. I do have Chief Moody here. I asked him to be here to let you know, kind of what we can expect and how that works and what we'll be doing. So I'll let Chief kind of give you an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening to you. As Mr. Miller stated, So we learned last week that the president had approved a presidential disaster declaration for our January 2nd and 3rd snow emergency. I think anybody here that lived, that was in King George County during that week would certainly say that it was a disaster. FEMA has forwarded the application to the president. He signed off on it. And so what has been approved is local recovery efforts in the areas affected by those winter storms. King George was one of the 27 counties. There were 27 counties and one city that were approved in that disaster declaration. That one city was the city of Fredericksburg. So kind of the little bit of next steps going forward. There's still very little details involved. One of the good things is that staff over that time frame had started collecting valuable data. That data has been captured. We have submitted initial damage assessment reports to the state. We will communicate with the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, which is essentially the FEMA, the state level FEMA, if you will. We will submit a public assistance application with reporting. Typically under these declarations, we will submit our projects, we will submit a dollar threshold with those projects, and then FEMA will approve them or deny them or provide, they'll need more further feedback and they have questions on those projects. Typically under presidential disaster declarations, the cost sharing in that is 75%. The federal government will provide 75% of those funds. There's also a 15% typical match that the state will put forth, and then a lot of times the local match will be about a 10%. Well, we've already paid that. Most of that's been in payroll expenses. Just to touch on it just a little bit further, so anytime you have a disaster declaration in your community, you also have the opportunity for future hazard mitigation grants. And we have received hazard mitigation grants in the past, and most notably, one of our largest hazard mitigation projects is just wrapping up and just got complete, and that was the Fairview Beach erosion project, beach erosion. So that had a huge impact in our community for the people that particularly live in Fairview Beach. But more will come about. Stay tuned, and I'll certainly update Mr. Miller, and also and we'll go throughout this process and hopefully bring back some money funding back to the county. Any questions?
Thank you, Chief. Any questions? Are we done with the snow for the year?
I hope so. It's looking good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Collins?
So for debate and discussion, I'd like to make a motion that the $439.30 for the Foia request be waived of fees for myself.
I wasn't there yet, Mr. Collins. Chief was still there, and I wanted to make sure Mr. Miller was done, and I was going to address that here in just a second. Mr. Miller, were you finished with everything?
The only thing I would add, and I didn't include it on the FOIA request, was that we are now working with the materials to assemble those and then to provide them to Supervisor Collins per his request. So that's the next step, and I believe it comes tomorrow, I think, is under the guidelines in terms of the deadlines that we have. So just wanted to, I didn't get that included. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that.
Okay, thank you.
That's it, though.
Okay, thank you. What would the board like to do with Mr. Collins' request?
I'll second his motion in the interest of entertaining discussion.
Okay, we have a motion properly seconded. Do we have discussion?
So I'm very familiar with the FOIA laws, and I understand that when a citizen requests information from the government, they have rights to the FOIA. So I spoke with Ms. Lackey in regards to this, and that's the legal opinion you have in front of you about a citizen. So I am a citizen, but I also am an elected board member. When an elected board member requests information and doesn't receive it, how do you get the information? I asked Ms. Lackey that question. She said she doesn't know. So the only other means to receive the information was through FOIA. And I would suggest to my colleagues that if you request information from the county administrator or any other place, that if I'm paying for these requests, then you should too. So I don't think that we want to start that type of thing. I think I should be able to get the records and be it as that.
Anyone else? Ms. Skupka.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. So I would note, I requested a copy of Mr. Collins's FOIA request dated March 1st, 2022, that was provided to the county attorney at that public meeting. There are two boxes that are checked, and one box that is checked says, in order to help to determine my status to assess fees, you should know that I am an individual seeking information for personal use. So that to me seems to be at odds with the request as a duly elected member of the Board of Supervisors. Until this was presented in a public meeting, I had not received a request from Mr. Collins for any of my emails or frankly, any information to my knowledge. I feel like there was if the information was desired, I feel like maybe there was a different way that someone could have gone about acquiring the information. I know for the Service Authority Board, I mentioned during my report that I did call staff on Friday and ask questions and then sent an email to Mr. Miller asking for information that was then provided to all members of the Service Authority Board. I would also note that when the FOIA administrator sends the response dated March 8th, there is a sentence at the bottom that says, if you would like to narrow the scope of your request by time frame, subject, or other variable, please also let me know, as that may reduce the associated costs. We've been informed that then there was a request, not from a county email address, but from a personal email address, requesting a waiver of the fees. So I'm just not clear if this is for personal use, because it looks an awful lot to me like there's some indication that it is based on the fact that a personal email address was used, as well as the box was checked on the original form that was offered to the county attorney. I don't see anywhere where the individual took Ms. Smith up on the offer of narrowing the scope of the request by time frame, subject, or other variable. And to my knowledge, the FOIA request hasn't been rescinded. And I just feel like there was another way to go about getting this information from all of us and just ask.
I did.
So that's where I'm at.
So, Mr. Chairman, may I have the floor one more time, please?
Just 1 second. Mrs. Bender.
I'll let Mr. Collins go first. I'm still looking at this for a second.
Okay. Mr. Granger.
I will just also share that I never received any correspondence from Mr. Collins asking for my emails or my texts in this format. So the first I saw that was through this FOIA request. If you reach out to me, Mr. Collins, I don't mind sharing information. If you're going to ask me blanket amount of information, like for just months and months, any correspondence between me and board members on texts or anything, I would ask you, hey, what are you looking for? What can I help you find? I don't mind sharing information. But if you want me to produce documents like that, then yeah, I think that might be more of a FOIA request, and it goes down this path, and it has the expectation that there would be a cost that would go with collecting all that information because it takes time from the staff to do that.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Collins.
So first off, the requester in the FOIA doesn't need to tell you why they're getting the information. It also states in the FOIA law that the people providing the information can ask to have the scope narrowed. I didn't want the scope narrowed, so I didn't respond to that. I did respond that I requested a waiver that I did in the form. So to Ms. Kupka, if you can tell me a different way that I could have got this information, because I asked for it and I never got it, and I can give you example after example. And so can you, if I can't get this information through the county administrator, how can I get it without a FOIA? Tell me how I can do it.
Well, Mr. Collins, I think you've only asked me for one thing, that was for a budget information, which we don't have yet. That was December, maybe. No, I guess you were there yet, but you were asking for the budget. I don't have that information. None of us have that information because we won't have that information until April or May. You've never asked me for emails until tonight. You asked me for some information about the hunting ordinance, and tomorrow I will send you emails from Mr. Fike, Sergeant Spacase. I don't have emails, but I have phone calls to Sheriff Giles and Sheriff Dempsey, and I will most gladly send those to you tomorrow. I've asked, over the last couple of years, staff members, two county administrators now, county attorneys, and I've asked for information. I've always gotten what I've asked for unless they don't have it. Sometimes they say, we don't have that, or let me get that to you later on, because they just don't have it at their fingertips, or maybe they may not know it. But I've never had a question, maybe I'm asking the wrong questions, but I've never had a question that I asked that I didn't get a response to or answers. But I will be, as Mr. Granger said, if you need an email about whatever, if you didn't get it, I'll be more than happy to share it with you. I know you were talking about the Lake Caledon letter, I think that we all got, and you got a copy the day of the meeting. You can always, if you see something in the board packet that you don't have an answer to, you can always reach out to any of us or staff. And if you don't get an answer from staff, by all means, reach out to the other four of us. And if we have an answer for you, I'm sure we will share it for you.
Well, there's been communications between board members in regards to specific subject matters that I find out the hard way. So I want to have the information that the rest of you do. And therefore, that's why this FOIA is, because I want to see the information that has been shared with you that has not been shared with me. I mean, I can give you a couple examples of the information that wasn't shared with me, or other people that were privy to the information that I wasn't privy to. But the point of the matter is this is in front of you to obtain information. This is not some political other witch hunt. This is purely to get information. And when I ask for information, I don't get it. I'm not asking you for information. I'm asking him for information. So in order to know that information, in order to get this, I have to get the communications between you and each supervisor member. That's why that comes into play. So, if you can tell me a different way I can get this information, I've asked for it and asked for it and asked for it several times and never received it. From the time before I got elected and to the time I've been here for a couple months. So, I don't want to be spending the rest of my, this is $439 out of my retirement. I get paid $15,000 on the Board of Supervisors, and I guess I got $14,500 left to Foia requests. I don't know. But if I'm paying, I think you all should pay too.
May I, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
So I just want to make sure that there is an understanding, like I will give a good example of emails that were between Ms. Binder and I last month with regard to a memorial commendation for one of our constituents. And we can't email, you can't, a member should not, it is not a best practice to hit reply all to all 5 of us, because when we do that, if more than 3 of us, if 3 of us are on the email, that creates the appearance of a meeting, an illegal meeting. So it's simply not practical for one of us to send an email out to everybody on the board. And frankly, there are going to be initiatives that Ms. Binder and I work on because I'm the at-large supervisor and she's the Shiloh district supervisor, and maybe it's dealing with one of our constituents. So, you know, communication is a two-way street, and just pick up the phone. And then I would defer to Ms. Lackey with regards to my own personal, and that's my own personal understanding of public meetings and 5 board members all talking at once in the same email thread, and the appearance of a meeting. Thank you.
I understand what a public meeting is, and I'm not. I've
Mr.
never
Collins,
asked for it.
can you hold on for a second?
No, I need to address her statement as if I don't know what I'm talking about.
Right. In just a second, Mrs. Binder also has a question, and I will get back to you here in just a second.
I have 2 questions. One is, how is the hourly rate decided on? Because they have different numbers.
That would be based on Mr. Dine's salary.
Okay, so it's based on
an hourly
salary.
breakdown of his salary and an hourly breakdown of Ms. Smith's salary and an hourly breakdown of my salary.
Okay, and then another question, and I understand what Ms. Kupka said, because I will tell you, in my first year on the board, I would sometimes accidentally hit reply all. And I had a former colleague who would always sternly speak to me about, now you've created an open meeting and you can't do that. So if there is a better way that we can share certain information so that everyone is informed, and I will give an example of with Perkins Corner, because I felt, and I expressed this to Mr. Miller in person, that I should have been more informed about it. And you know, what is a better practice in the future of informing the person who's the supervisor in that particular district when there is an issue? So maybe we all could work together as a board to better communicate certain issues that affect all 5 of us. But I do understand there are certain things that, you know, you can't hit reply all or all 5. So that's the comment I wanted to make, because I remember when I was first on the board, I got the explanation a couple times by a former colleague that was, now you started a meeting. But maybe there is a better way that we could do this in the future so that one board member does not feel that they are not given the information, that they're in the dark. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Mr. Collins.
So to suggest that I don't understand what open meeting laws are is a farce. I was on the school board for 8 years and communicated with all the members on the school board as chairman, as a member. You don't hit reply all. You send one to each individual. Yes, it's more time consuming, but that is how the law reads. So that's my debate in regards to that.
Mr. Granger?
Yes, thank you. I would just say, so in regards to asking for communication between 2 individuals, I want to go to Mr. Miller and say, Mr. Miller, could you please provide me information about the correspondence between Ms. Kupka and Ms. Binder? I would go to Ms. Kupka and Ms. Binder. I would expect that if someone asked about my correspondence, they'd reach out to me. Mr. Miller is the employee of the board, and so he serves us, but at the same time, his duties are to execute the business to the county, the day-to-day business. And so it's it's a very full job. And so I think all of us need to be cognizant of, yes, he works for the board. He has duties, though, that take a lot of his time. And if we're expecting him to now start collating information and run down, hey, I want you to go find out all the information about these people who communicated together, even though you haven't been in the loop maybe on some of those communications. I just don't think that's the right route. I would recommend you reach out to the people that you want to find the information out from. And like I said, in the Foia request, there's a request to say, hey, I want all the communication between any board members via email or text. And so that's a very big ask. And so there's no scoping of that. And as a board member, I don't understand what the goal is, what we're trying to look for. Just, that's a Foia request as opposed to, trying to do the day-to-day business of the county. So I just would ask Mr. Collins in the future, you said how to go about doing this. You didn't ask me for this information. I've never been asked for this information. I would recommend that you reach out to the board members when you want to know about what they're corresponding. And I think that's probably the best way to go about trying to find out what's going on, as opposed to reaching out to Mr. Miller and saying, you go to all of them and then tell me what they're saying to each other. Because that's what it sounds like to me.
So, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Collins.
So the specifics is in the Foia. Don't just take out part of the sentence and say, to and from. It says to and from any member of the Board of Supervisors to each other, or the county administrator, or the Water Authority Board of Directors. That's what it says. And at my last meeting, you will recall that, I think there's a transparency issue. And so I don't think it's transparent because I'm not getting the information. I didn't know that I had to go around. I thought that I would be given information, not have to track all the information down myself. I didn't know that's how this worked.
Well, I know when I have a question on something, I will go to either to Mr. Miller or to colleagues, and they do, you have to, at times you do track down your own information. I mean, you've got certain questions and then you go to the correct person to get the answers to. I mean, so that happens quite often.
I know who has the answers. I have to track down. So I asked the county administrator in regards to something and I don't get provided it. So I do my own research on the issues, but issues are being discussed that I don't have the purview to that I think I should be as one of 5 members.
Okay. Anything else?
I do have a question, Mr. Chair. Ms. Lackey, how common, or do you know how common do FOIA requests come from other supervisors and waive your honor?
I'm sorry, I missed the second part was how often are they?
Yeah, is this a common practice? I mean, because this would be my first time on a board.
So it's hard to say because I think oftentimes localities have a policy that is uniform as to the general public, and there are, if you will, a little bit of licenses generally provided to elected officials. Some of the things other supervisors have mentioned, if you're asking for follow-up or backup for an agenda item, that's usually provided as, as a matter of course. This one is a little more unusual because of the manner it was presented and the scope of what it entails. It entails a lot of search, and for that reason, it's perfectly appropriate for the county to have fees imposed. Those fees those fees are actually discounted, if you will, because they don't include the time of each supervisor to search through their own text messages. I understand Supervisor Collins has an objection to them doing so, but as far as I know, there's no way for IT to search text messages, at least for the scope of the time frame that's required. So that part of the search would be performed by the supervisors, basically free of charge, but it would still entail a lot of staff time to compile all the email records and whatever other written records there are. So I guess it's an order of magnitude. I think most of you, as as some of you have indicated, you've asked for things from the county administrator, and typically if that's a record that exists and can be provided, that's generally provided as a matter of course. But when there's something that's as broad as this, it is a little bit of a different animal, and in the absence of a policy, I think that Mr. Miller was correct to have staff produce a cost estimate.
Is this something that should have a policy to it, or is this just a very odd situation?
If I may answer, I mean, you do have a policy in place from August of 2018. The August 21st meeting is my understanding, the former administrator, Dr. Young, presented that to you. So, and there have been subsequent FOIA requests made by individuals. So, I assume you have a policy. I don't, it doesn't state the rates or anything like that,
Yeah,
but it basically says you have a right to
I
charge.
looked to see.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Just a second, Mr. Collins.
According to Robert's rules, a point of order will be handled immediately.
Okay, Mr. Collins, go ahead.
So this debate is a debate of the board. So unless a specific question is asked to Ms. Latney or Mr. Miller, they should stay out of the debate.
Okay. So I'll have a question for Mrs. Lackey directly to her. So if I'm reading this email that we all have copies of here, it does say that if we did consider waiving costs to an elected official, that in the future we could not bill the public for a FOIA request. Is that correct in my reading?
Right. So I think one of the reasons why it's difficult to pin down a policy from another jurisdiction, part of it is because the more liberally you allow an elected official to make FOIAs, they can effectively make FOIAs on behalf of members of the public, and then you're defeating your whole cost structure for having fees. And that could happen naturally. It could be one of you mentioned something, I would like to see, Mr. Miller, I'd like to see this document. And someone hears that on the record and they say, I would also like that document. Well, then they get that document for free. And that's not necessarily a bad thing when we're talking about a document that's readily at hand. So it's a matter of policy as to the scope of a request. The Hanover County has a policy. They waive the first 60 minutes of search time. City of Chesapeake waives the first 15 minutes of search time as to any member, any FOIA requester. But those are just matters of policy. So that's a matter for the board as a whole.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have anything so we can move along? All right, well, we have a motion that was properly seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Chair votes nay. Motion is not approved. Okay, administrator's report, information items coming up. Mr. Miller? We don't have any, just these information items?
That's it. Nothing
Okay.
else.
So, we are finished for that. And so do we have a motion? Yes, we did. We got them.
I'll move to adjourn to Wednesday, March 16th at 6:30 PM in the boardroom.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.